I'm Marisol. My brother said I was too rough around the edges to sit at his graduation dinner, so he quietly left me off the invitation list. Not just that he'd been letting me pay his tuition for 3 years, while his girlfriend's family got every ounce of his gratitude. I pulled my final payment 48 hours before his last semester ended. What happened next wasn't something I planned, but I wasn't sorry either. The notification came on a Tuesday morning, right in the middle of me untangling a design revision for a client who couldn't make up his mind about the shade of blue on his logo. My phone buzzed against the desk, face up, and I saw my brother's name. I almost smiled. He never texted me in the morning, unless he needed something, or unless something good had happened. I figured it was one or the other, and either way, I was ready. The message read, "Hey, just a heads up, the graduation dinner is staying pretty small. Elaine's parents are hosting, so it's mostly their side and a few of my close friends from the program. You know how it is. We'll celebrate with you some other time. Love you." I read it once, then again. Then I set the phone down and stared at the wall across from my desk like it might offer an explanation the text hadn't bothered to give. "We'll celebrate with you some other time." I'd heard that sentence before, in different forms, from different mouths. It was the sentence people used when they meant you don't really fit here, but we don't want to say it out loud. I knew the grammar of that sentence. I'd been fluent in it my whole life. I picked my phone back up and typed back, "Got it. No problem." Because that's what I always did. I kept it smooth, kept it clean, kept it from becoming something that would require more emotional energy than I had budgeted for a Tuesday. But my hands were doing that thing where they moved slower than usual, like my body already understood what my brain was still negotiating. I should back up. 3 years earlier, our mom had called me on a Sunday evening, her voice doing that careful thing where she measured every word like she was pouring batter and didn't want to spill. "Your brother got into the program," she said. "Business law. It's a really good school, Marisol. But the financial aid package wasn't what we hoped." I waited. She waited. And then she said, "You've always been the steady one." I was 26. I had a freelance design business that was doing well enough that I had savings and a routine, and a sense that I was finally building something that was mine. And I loved my brother. He was 3 years younger than me, and still soft in the way people are when life hasn't handed them anything too hard yet. I didn't want to watch that softness get crushed by student debt before he ever got started. So I said yes. I set up the payments: tuition, books, a portion of his rent in the city near campus. I didn't make a big deal of it. I didn't put it on a spreadsheet and send it to the family group chat. I just did it, the way I did most things, quietly, without ceremony, because that was the role I had always filled. Over those 3 years, my brother called when he needed money moved faster, or when a bill came in unexpected, or when I needed to co-sign something. He called less often just to talk. I told myself that was normal. He was busy. Law school was demanding. He had a girlfriend now, Elaine, whose parents lived in a nice suburb outside of Boston and owned a landscaping company that had apparently grown into something substantial. I'd never met them. My brother mentioned them the way people mention things they're proud of, but don't want to examine too closely briefly, glowingly, with a kind of reverence that left no room for follow-up questions. I was happy for him. That part was real. But after that Tuesday morning text, I sat with my coffee going cold and started counting the things I hadn't let myself count before. $37,000 over 3 years. Not a loan, a gift. Because I had never once mentioned repayment, and he had never once offered it. Not one moment at his school where he had introduced me to a professor or a classmate or said, "This is my sister, she's the reason I'm here." Not once. And now, not a seat at the dinner where they would all toast to how far he'd come. I opened Instagram out of habit more than intention. My brother's profile was public. He posted sparingly, mostly about his program, a few shots of the city, the occasional photo with Elaine where they were both dressed in the kind of clothes that said aspirationally casual. I scrolled slowly. 3 weeks ago, there was a photo from a dinner Elaine's father at the head of the table, laughing, his arm around my brother's shoulder. The caption read, "Grateful for the family that believed in me from day one." From day one, I put my phone face down. The thing about slow realizations is that they don't arrive with drama. They arrive with a kind of nausea. Like your stomach figured it out before your head caught up, and now your head is just processing the paperwork. I didn't call my mom right away. I already knew the shape of that conversation. She would answer cheerfully, too cheerfully, the way she did when she was bracing herself. And she would say something like, "Marisol, honey, don't read into it. It's just dinner." And then she would say, "He's got a lot going on. Let's not make waves. Let's keep it easy. Let's keep it easy." I had spent the better part of my 20s keeping it easy. Keeping it easy was how I had learned to make myself invisible. I went back to my client's logo revision. I picked the shade of blue he wanted, even though I knew it was the wrong choice. Some battles are worth fighting. Some aren't. I submitted the file and invoiced him, and then I closed my laptop and went for a walk, which is what I do when I'm too calm for how upset I actually am. The neighborhood I live in is nothing fancy. It's a mid-sized city in North Carolina, with good light in the afternoons and a coffee shop on the corner that plays music just loud enough to drown out your thoughts if you need it to. I walked past it without going in and turned down a side street where the houses had big front porches and American flags and small dogs that barked at nothing. I thought about my brother. I thought about the version of him from before college, the one who used to call me just to tell me something funny that had happened at work, the one who drove 3 hours to help me move apartments without being asked. I thought about how that version of him seemed further away now than the mileage between us. I walked for about 40 minutes, and then I went home and opened my laptop again. It took me 2 searches to find the graduation dinner on Elaine's Instagram. She had posted a story preview, a restaurant reservation screenshot with the date, the name of an upscale Italian place downtown, and a party size of 14. 14. I knew my brother's social circle well enough to do the mental math. His 2 closest friends from the program, Elaine's parents and her sister. A few professors he'd mentioned. And then presumably a generous cushion of people who mattered in ways I apparently did not. I wasn't on that list. I wasn't even in the math. I closed the browser and stared at the cursor blinking on a blank document I'd opened without knowing why. My cousin reached out to me that evening. She had been close with my brother growing up and was still loosely connected to his college life through a few mutual friends. Her message was short. "Hey, did you get weird vibes about the graduation thing? One of my friends from his program mentioned something, and I just wanted to check on you." I replied, "What did they mention?" She took a few minutes. Then she sent a screenshot. I almost didn't open it. There was a specific feeling I got, right before something changed everything. A kind of held breath in my chest, like my body knew what was coming and was trying to prepare. I opened the screenshot anyway. It was a group message. My brother's name was at the top. The conversation was from a few weeks earlier, apparently part of a thread planning the dinner. Someone had asked if my brother's family would be coming. His reply was, "Just keeping it to people who fit the vibe. My sister is great, but she's kind of a lot. Elaine's parents are pretty traditional, and I don't want any awkwardness." Elaine had replied with a heart emoji. Beneath that, another person had asked, "Is she the one paying your tuition?" And my brother had answered, "She offered." It was her choice. I didn't ask her to make it her whole thing. I read that last sentence 3 times. I didn't ask her to make it her whole thing. I set my phone on the kitchen counter and walked to the refrigerator. I opened it, stared inside at nothing in particular, and closed it again. I did this twice. My apartment was very quiet. Outside, a car passed with music playing, and then the street went silent again. Her choice. I had made a choice. That was true. But the thing about choices is that they exist inside of context. I had chosen to pay because he was my brother, and I loved him, and I genuinely believed that it meant something. That I meant something to him beyond what my bank account could offer. I wasn't looking for a trophy. I wasn't looking for my name on a plaque. I just thought that when the moment came where he stood up in front of the people who mattered and talked about how he'd gotten here, I would be somewhere in that room. I wouldn't be a liability to manage around Elaine's traditional parents. I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring, her voice carrying that particular brightness she reserved for calls she had been expecting. "Marisol, hey. How are you, sweetheart?" I told her I'd seen the graduation dinner invitation situation. I kept my voice level. I was proud of how level I kept it. She paused. Oh, honey, I know. I know it probably stings a little, but you know how your brother is. He's just nervous about making a good impression on Elaine's family. This dinner is really important to him. I said, Mom, I've been paying his tuition for 3 years, and she said, I know that, and we are so grateful. But this isn't about money, Marisol. It's about him having a smooth night. You can be a lot sometimes. You know that. And I don't mean that badly. I just mean that you have a big personality, and he's probably just trying to manage the energy of the evening. A big personality. I had heard this before, too. My whole life, being direct, had been repackaged as being difficult. Being honest had been called being dramatic. Having feelings had been described as being a lot. It was the family's way of explaining away any inconvenience I caused by existing in ways that didn't suit the narrative. I said, Okay, Mom, I hear you. She sighed with relief. She actually sighed with relief. Good. Don't make this into something bigger than it is. He loves you. We all do. I said, I know. And then I hung up. I opened my phone's banking app. The final tuition payment was scheduled for Thursday. $12,000, the last installment of his final semester. I had set it up automatically 6 months ago and hadn't thought about it since because I had operated, for years, on the assumption that this was what I did. This was my role. I was the steady one. I stared at the payment for a long time. I didn't cancel it that night, but I didn't sleep either. I lay in the dark, thinking about the phrase she offered, and wondering when generosity had become something that could be used to diminish the person giving it. I thought about the graduation dinner, 14 people in a nice Italian restaurant, and me not being counted among them. I thought about Elaine's father laughing with his arm around my brother, and that caption, family that believed in me from day one. And I thought about all the days between day one and today that I had quietly funded without a single caption. At some point, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I felt the kind of clarity that only comes from having fully processed something in the dark while you thought you were just lying awake doing nothing. I made coffee. I sat at my desk. I opened the banking app. I canceled the payment. It took less than 30 seconds. A few taps, a confirmation screen, and then it was done. $12,000, returned to pending, then removed. No dramatic music. No ceremony. Just a Thursday morning, and the hum of my refrigerator, and the feeling of something finally clicking into place after years of being slightly misaligned. I didn't send my brother a message. I didn't call my mom. I didn't post anything. I just sat with it for a while, which is something I should have been doing with a lot of things for a long time. That afternoon, I drove to the plant nursery 3 blocks from my apartment and bought 2 potted herbs I had been meaning to get for months, basil and lemon thyme, and I put them on my kitchen windowsill in the afternoon light, and felt, for the first time, in a very long time, like I was doing something for myself without calculating the effect it would have on someone else. My phone started ringing that evening. My brother. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let that go too. Then my mom called, and I watched her name blink on the screen for the full duration until it stopped. The voicemail from my brother came in at 7:43. I let it sit for 20 minutes before I listened. His voice was tense, in a way he was trying to disguise as calm. Hey, I just got an alert from the school that the payment didn't process. There must be a glitch or something. Can you check on it? The deadline to confirm enrollment for finals is tomorrow, and I can't be late with this. Call me back. There must be a glitch. I did not call back. My mom texted at 8. Marisol, your brother said there's an issue with the payment. Please just fix it tonight, okay? He's stressed. This is the worst time. My cousin sent me a separate message. I just heard from my friend that your brother is kind of freaking out. Did you do something? I replied to her. I just stopped doing something. She sent back a single emoji. A small, quiet thumbs up. I didn't fix the payment. I made dinner pasta with the basil from my new windowsill, which was already doing better than I expected, and I watched something on television that I couldn't have told you the plot of if you asked, because I was mostly just existing in the strange new quiet of having made a decision that I couldn't take back and wasn't sure I wanted to. The calls escalated over the next 2 days. My brother's tone shifted. The first message was confusion. The second was irritation with a thin coat of civility over it. By the third, the civility was gone. "I know you canceled it," he said into my voicemail. "I called the bank to confirm it." "What are you doing, Marisol? This is my last semester. You can't do this. This is my future." My mom left a voicemail that sounded like it had been rehearsed. She said that I was being selfish, that I was punishing him for something that wasn't a big deal, that the family didn't need this kind of drama, especially now, especially with Elaine's family involved. She said, "You always do this. You always make things about you." There it was again. You always make things about you. I had spent 3 years and $37,000 making things about someone else. I thought about that while I walked to the coffee shop on the corner and ordered a latte I didn't need, and sat by the window, watching people move through the afternoon like they had no idea any of this was happening. My cousin called me that night. When I picked up, she didn't start with the situation. She asked how I was doing first, which sounds small, but wasn't. I told her I was okay. Tired, clearer than I had been in a while. She said she believed me. Then she told me what she'd heard. Elaine's parents had been CC'd on some of the financial aid correspondence, apparently helping my brother navigate some of the paperwork, and when the tuition payment hadn't processed, there had been a conversation at their dinner table about it. From what my cousin understood, Elaine's father had made it clear that the situation reflected poorly on my brother's judgment, relying on a sibling's generosity for 3 years without a formal plan. He had apparently said something like, "A man going into law should know how to manage his own affairs." My brother had reportedly not defended me in that conversation. He had let Elaine's father's assessment sit there like it was fair. I took a long breath. I wasn't angry. I was past angry. I was in some quieter territory past it, where things just became clear like fog burning off in the morning. I opened my email and composed a message to my brother. I kept it short. "I've canceled the final payment. I want to be honest with you about why, because you deserve that even if recent events suggest the feeling isn't mutual. I've been glad to support you. But support works when it goes both ways, and somewhere, over the last 3 years, you started treating what I gave you as infrastructure. Something expected, something invisible, something that didn't require my presence or acknowledgement. I found out about the graduation dinner. I saw the screenshot. I know what you said. I'm not writing this to hurt you. I'm writing this because I think you've forgotten that I'm a person, not a resource. I hope the rest of your semester goes well. I genuinely do." I hit send. I booked a long weekend in Asheville. I'd been meaning to go for 2 years, and kept putting it off because there was always something more urgent, always someone else's timeline to accommodate. I packed a bag that night. Linen pants, a swimsuit, 2 books I'd been meaning to read since winter. I left early the next morning, before anyone in my family had a chance to restart the conversation. The drive was 3 hours through the mountains. The kind of drive where the landscape gradually becomes more of itself, more green, more vertical, more honest about how small everything else is by comparison. I had the windows down. I didn't listen to a podcast or a playlist. I just drove and let my mind do what it needed to. I arrived at a small inn near downtown, checked in, and immediately went for a walk through the arts district. I bought a ceramic mug from a woman who made them herself in a studio at the back of her shop. She asked if I was local. I said no, just here for a few days. She said, "Those are sometimes the best kind of days." I agreed. That evening, I sat on the small porch off my room with one of my books and a glass of wine and watched the mountains do their thing in the dusk light, going from green to blue to something that wasn't quite either. My phone was inside on the nightstand. I had turned the sound off, not as a statement, just because I didn't need it out here. Whatever was happening back home could wait. My brother would figure out the tuition. He might have to take out a loan for 1 semester. He might have to go back to the financial aid office and have a real conversation about his situation. He might have to ask Elaine's father, who had apparently adopted him as a project, to put some of that investment where his commentary was. Any of those outcomes would be hard. None of them would be my fault. The message from my mom came through the next morning. I saw it when I woke up and decided to read it over coffee on the porch rather than in the dark of the bedroom. It was longer than I expected. She had apparently written it in multiple sittings, because the tone changed halfway through. The first half was angry you hurt your brother, you're being vindictive, you've always resented his success. The second half was softer and sadder and harder to read. She wrote, I know we haven't always seen you clearly. I know that. But please don't blow up the family over a dinner invitation. I didn't blow up the family. The family structure had required me to make myself smaller and smaller until I was basically load-bearing and invisible at the same time. I had just stopped doing that. The blow-up, whatever form it took, was the sound of the weight redistribution. I didn't reply that morning. I went for a hike instead, a trail a few miles outside of town that my innkeeper had recommended with the specific enthusiasm of someone who genuinely loved where they lived. The trail went up through hardwood forest, damp and cool, even in the warmth of late spring, and I walked at my own pace, which was slower than most of the other hikers I passed, but steady, which I had come to believe was better than fast most of the time. At the top, there was a clearing with a view of several mountain ridges layered against each other in shades of blue and green, going back as far as the sky. I stood there for a while. I wasn't thinking about my brother or Elaine, or the dinner, or the tuition, or any of it. I was just standing there being the size I actually was, which turned out to be a pretty good size when I wasn't trying to compress it. I replied to my mom that evening. I kept it brief. I told her I loved her. I told her that I wasn't trying to punish anyone, but that I had reached a limit I hadn't known was there until I was standing on the other side of it. I told her that I hoped we could have an honest conversation someday, a real one, without anyone needing to be managed or kept easy. I hit send, and then I put the phone in my bag and went to dinner alone at a restaurant where I sat at the bar and ordered something I'd never tried, and had a perfectly good conversation with the person next to me about nothing in particular, which was exactly what I needed. On my last morning in Asheville, I woke up before my alarm. The light was early and pale through the curtains. I lay there for a little while, listening to birds, which sounds simple, but was the first morning in weeks that hadn't started with some kind of low hum of dread about what the day's notifications would bring. My cousin had sent me something overnight. She had spoken to my grandmother, who was in her 70s, and had always been the sharpest person in any room she occupied without ever needing anyone to know it. My grandmother had told my cousin to pass something along to me. The message was simple, in her voice exactly. Tell Marisol she didn't cause the crack. She just finally stopped filling it in. I read that twice. Then I got up and made the small in-room coffee and brought it to the porch and sat with it until it was gone. I'm back home now. The basil on my windowsill has grown noticeably in a week, which my innkeeper would probably say something wise about if she knew. My brother enrolled for finals. I don't know how he resolved the tuition, and I haven't asked. He sent me one final message, shorter than the others. It just said, I'm sorry I made you feel like you didn't matter. I know that's not enough right now. It wasn't enough, but it was real, which was more than I'd gotten in a long time, so I let it sit there without responding immediately. I'm not in a rush. Some things are worth taking slowly. I've been thinking about what I actually want the next version of my life to look like, not as the steady one, not as the load-bearing wall behind someone else's renovation. Something that starts with me, asking what I need first, not last, not never. I don't have a perfect answer, but I finally feel like I'm allowed to look for one. The thing I know now, the thing I wish I had understood earlier, is that being generous is not the same as being expendable, and choosing to give doesn't obligate you to disappear. I gave because I loved my brother, and that was real, and I'm not ashamed of it. But love is not a transaction where only one person keeps the receipt. I let myself fund his future. I'm done letting him decide whether I get to be in it. If any part of what I just told you sounds familiar, the quiet erasure, the family pressure to keep it easy, the slow realization that you've been held together by people who assumed you'd always be there, I want you to hear something directly from me. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to take up the space that was always yours. And you are allowed to leave the room when you realize the only role they ever wrote for you was the one happening just off stage. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had to pull back your support to remind someone you were a person, not a function? I read everything. If this story meant something to you, Hit the like button and tell me where you're watching from. Whether you're in a city apartment, a suburb kitchen, or somewhere in the mountains with better light than anywhere else I see you, subscribe and turn on notifications if you want more stories like this one. I'll be here. Real stories, no filters, no easy endings, just the truth and what we do with it.